time?
You would?
Go ahead, full steam.
Okay.
Yes.
No, it's good that it's a smaller crowd because I wanted to do like a dialogue more than like a conversational format, but I thought that with Tyos would be timing me, so I actually wrote the whole thing down. So I would go over it quickly, and then like if I have time, I will direct the discussion towards my own point. So I'll try to read over what I have quickly, and I have my points on the board because I want to go over them quickly, so I can just refer to them. I just wanted, before I start, I just wanted to say, yeah, like as you said, like if you've done who's done competitive sports, like other than what you've done, like professionally, you've done.
No.
Like, it's such a thrill. Like once you're in it, like the depiction of the movie was really good of the people who attend. Like the times that you have to wait for your next. I did swimming, so it was exactly like this. I did relay and I did front crawl and back front and butterfly, and it's. I was best at front crawl, but I was placed 11th. It was really. I thought I'm gonna be the first or second, but just like the movie, there were a few Russian guys who used to swim ever since they were 3, and they beat everybody, and they were the popular guys. It's usually not like the movie. Usually the popular guys are also the stronger ones, and they usually beat everybody, like the Michael Phelps and Bolts from Jamaica. So, but yeah, the movie was interesting. I was telling Connie that I don't like a lot of sport movies, but it's just But once you do some of the competitive sport yourself, it just, that tension, it's not really play out in the movie, so you don't like it as much. And also when you win, like I happened to win the combined team in swimming in Toronto region, and when you win, it's just like the movie. You don't really feel anything. But when you lose, you feel a lot of emotions. But when you win, you just, you come out and like, oh, okay, it's really weird. It is really weird.
You are weird.
No, it's the same feeling. It's just people think winning is such a big deal, but and it is a big deal. It is a big deal, and you realize it after once you buy into it. But just at the moment you win, you're like, okay, I won. Yes, it's good. Okay, so I'll just get into it. So my talk is about religious belief in Chariot of Fire. And obviously I'm a philosophy major, so I'm not going to go into cinematic effects. That's how I usually give my talks anyways. I think this is the main theme of the movie, and I was glad that what made the movie good was, I think, the soundtracks and the scripts, for which it has got the Oscar. And the scripts were really well researched, and the soundtracks were really amazing. They are what made the movie immortal. I think it is. But I want to focus on a different angle today. So, dear cinephilists, hello. It is with great pride, but also strong hints of embarrassment, that I come here today to talk about the Chariots of Fire. A sense of pride because of the speakers who preceded me, but embarrassment too, for the very same reason. For doubtless I cannot live up to the standards set forth by the likes we have had the pleasure here present. As for my own talk, as much as I would like to conduct this in an interactive manner, like the previous conversations we had on suicide, I'd rather keep within the limit of time. I promise that this topic, though, would not be any less controversial. I will try to engage you during the Q&A instead. Let me embark on this endeavor without further blabber. The movie we just watched, Chariot of Fire, gets its name not from the infamous biblical parable, but from a similarly mythical poem by William Blake. The movie is not an all-star cast or a gang of super filmmakers. The producers, Connie pointed out, is the big guy. Sort of like takes the whole weight of the movie. The director he used to do advertising before, the director, and this was his first major film. And this is why I think I can avoid the author theory when I look at this movie. Not that I haven't before, but that has been so dominating, at least in our previous seasons, and maybe for the right reasons. But because author theory provides a dull and an unimaginative framework for the presenter, one only needs to envision the usual author theory puzzle of recognizing patterns of behavior and of the director or the series of actors, and fill in the pieces with the vast research literature that can buttress a viewpoint or easily its exact opposite. Of course, some would like to remind me that there is no right or wrong critique, but I think if you're going down that path, we should go down with our eyes wide open, and so that we won't accept just about anything. Because if we're going to do that, that is the same claim as saying everything is equally good, which is the same as saying everything is equally worthless. I say this because this is partly the path I'm going to take you down today. And I ask that we keep our eyes wide open, because to run down this slippery slope is to slip and fall into relativism, a position that not even the relativists of our current and contemporary philosophy want to admit to. So let us walk down, and we'll stop where we need to. The theme that I want to focus on is the distinction, is how to distinguish between different characters who the director is pushing into our faces. What makes our beliefs justified? That's, I think, what the criteria is for the movie. Plato famously distinguished between true belief and knowledge. And true belief, knowledge is what you know for really certain. Whereas true belief is something that you still, it's still open to doubt. Now, people who are not Platonists or they're not at least medieval thinkers believe that, at least some of them believe that you don't need knowledge. True belief would get you in a good philosophical position. Which means if you're in a good philosophical position, you should be able to distinguish between Harold, which was the Jewish guy, and Eric, which was the Christian. I'll just call them I'll just call them, and I hope that it will be clear. In this talk, in particular, I want to ask if there are situations where religious belief is justified. I will rely heavily on the writings of the prominent American philosopher, William James. And you may have heard about his brother, Henry James, the novelist. His connection to the movie is actually funny because, so the movie takes place in Cambridge. And Cambridge, at the same time, do you know who was teaching in Cambridge? Which famous philosopher? Wittgenstein, who else? There was another philosopher, right? Yeah. They were both there in Cambridge, and this movie is in Cambridge. And the only book that Wittgenstein was assigned to his courses was William James's book on percept and precept and principles of psychology. He disliked everything else in the entire realm of philosophy. That's like philosophy gossips. I will try to do more of these because I like them. So we are a people, I hope, who are critical of religion and patriotism alike. And yet we want to advocate religious tolerance. Tolerance does not mean conceding to religious biases. It shouldn't. So we are in a desperate need to find a criteria that would enable judgment of our characters in this movie. To ensure our judgment is as unbiased as possible, we must first and foremost establish the common ground shared by our religious belief. This, I think, can be more or less summarized in the following two items. I have them here. So the first one is there is something eternal and perfect about every religious belief. Sorry, I think I'm blocking it for you. Okay. So if you have a religious belief, or if you have some sort of faith-based belief, it's usually something that attaches you to something eternal that is perfect, and it's the best of what you can imagine. And the second one is you hold that the first one is true. You don't question it. So these two are the common ground of religious belief or faith-based belief. 1 and 2 seem to be the necessary condition under which one holds a type of religious belief. So if we really want to criticize the core of religious belief, it is these two views that should be criticized. Of course, you can criticize religion on other grounds, but a smart religious person could still slip away, right? Because you're only criticizing sufficient conditions. You gotta take on what is shared and what is necessary, what makes religious belief what it is. I'll just make that point. Okay. So a point that the movie makes then must be both about the Christian guy and the Jewish guy. It must be at least something that they both. It must be at least true that they both hold 1 and 2, and to exhibit and that's how they can exhibit the awe-inspiring behavior that they do, like going over with hiring a coach and standing up to the people in the committee, or canceling the race on Sunday. It's that type of thing that you can only do once you rely on this, if it's from your religious belief that you're being motivated. Holding 1 and 2 together entails that the holder of the view is justified in preserving the view for himself without searching for evidence, which is searching a priori, or without searching for benefits or utility. I have these right here behind me. So you, oh, actually I didn't write that on the board, but that's okay, I'll just say it. So in order to confirm your belief, you can either look for evidence, which is what the scientists do, and that would make out things like scientific statements, like there is gravity, and when you drop a pen it falls down, things of that sort. Or you can look for it a priori, like from mathematical truths or through reasoning. And these are things like 2 + 2 is 4 or whatever. And I know I am making a distinction between analytical sentences and synthetic ones, but let's not get into that. There's another way of looking into justifying a belief, and that is through seeing if it's useful, or how does it work out or play out in our lives. So if something cannot be proven by evidence, or it cannot be proven through logic, then if it's a really useful idea, once you work it out, once it plays out in action, then that idea could be true as well. That's the prudential sort of arguments. And the latter one is posteriori, and the previous one, even if we talk about evidence, is still a priori. To judge the truth of any view that helps decide an agent in a choice, we have to ask any of the two ostensibly identical questions. The first is the view representing a truth, like a mathematical idea, or is the view trying to avoid all errors? So in order to attach yourself to an idea, this I have right here, you have 2 approaches. You can just say something is true, like belief in God, or 2 + 2 is 4, or any of those things. You don't research it. You say, I have some ground on a proof, and I'm just going to stick to that, because I know that this is like the solemn, certain thing. And there's another ground, which is the more skeptical approach. It's the one where you try to shun all error, and you say, once I cannot find any errors to my problem or to my choice, then I know which one is the right choice. Obviously, the approach that is adopted most of the time today is the second one. It's the more scientific one. It's the one that all the research in the universities are based on. You don't assume something through and do prior reasoning for it. You try to not assume a belief, and you want to avoid it, and you want to keep doubting it. And that's for good reasons too. It's the more preferred approach. But I want to argue, based on James's, the idea is not very clear in James, but it's based on a few papers and one of his doctrines, that there are some contexts where if you have a choice that has these three criteria, then you can form a belief without really looking for evidence, which I think at least satisfies the criteria, that satisfies a ground for holding a religious belief. So James talks about a situation. He uses older words, so I just changed them. Whenever you have a choice, the situation of the choice makes the choice sometimes relevant, and sometimes it's not relevant. Like the belief of, for a lot of us, belief in God is not a relevant choice. It's not alive for us. But 200 years ago, when people thought God would be hiding behind that door, I just can't see him. That choice, like to say that God does not exist, was an important question. It was a really live choice. You know what I mean? So for some of you, the belief that aliens exist or not may be a dead choice. But for some people in Nebraska or New Mexico, that would be a really important choice. Like it's really serious for them. That's what makes the choice either relevant or dead, as James called it. The other one is pressing. So sometimes when you have a choice, the choices could be pressing. Like the choice between coming here tonight, watching Chariots of Fire, or going to see 12 Years a Slave, or going to see some other movie. Well, that's not a forced choice because, well, you don't have to go see a movie if you just stayed at home. I mean, it is a stormy night after all, so you don't have to come see a movie. And so that's not seeing a movie tonight and which one of the movies you should choose. That's not a forced choice. But there are situations where when choice is pressed on you, it is forced on you. You have to choose either or. There is no middle ground. There is no agnostic viewpoint. You can't say I'm not going to hold one way or one belief or another. There are other situations where the choice is momentous. This is actually a word that James uses. These are situations where the choice that you have will never return. James's own example is the chance of going to an Amazon expedition. Like it's a one-time chance, happens once in your life. Once you make a decision, it's irreversible. And these are momentous options. A lot of options are not momentous. Like a lot of, say, a chemist whose experiment is going bad. The choice of continuing the experiment or not is not a momentous choice because he can just come back tomorrow and work on it. A lot of scientific beliefs are formed in contexts where the choices that people make in those contexts do not depend on time constraints, or they are certainly most of the time reversible. They're not irreversible. But there are situations where James called this genuine option or genuine choice. There are situations where this happens, and what I think is in these situations, some sort of faith could verify the belief itself. You don't need to look for evidence, or you don't need to look for reasoning, or you don't even need to look for its usefulness. And that last one is the controversial one if somebody's a pragmatist here. So if a choice presents itself in a context that makes our option relevant, forced, and momentous, then it is possible and allowable to have faith in something without the need to verify it. In other words, we neither need evidence we neither need evidence or reasoning for it, nor an account of its usefulness. A sort of faith, then, in such situations seems justified because the context allows it and it provides its own verification. To see how the argument is working, I want to assume an example. It's a famous climber case that the pragmatists use all the time. There's a climber, and it's a very stormy night, maybe just like this tonight. And I'll just read off because it's better. I wrote it well. Now she's got herself into a bad situation, and she's not a bad mountaineer. She's quite a professional, and it's a stormy night, and she's doing her hike, and she has come across a large gorge which she has to jump over. He can either walk back or wait for help, but with the intensity of the storm, the decision will cost him his life. In a debacle like this, the climber does not wait and calculate the chance of survival. She jumps with the hopes that she is going to make it. There is a hope here that determines the truth of the phrase, "I can make the jump." And this will play out in his actions when the inquiry, "I should make the jump or not," is put into action. So just to clarify that, so she will ask herself, should I make this jump or not? But she doesn't know unless the inquiry is played into action. The way to see this is the truth of his statement does not come from any form of reasoning. it comes from its playing out into the action of the person who holds the belief. So really, you can't hold the belief before.
Before what? Before making the action?
Yeah, before the action plays out. The climber's belief is neither supported by any evidence nor encouraged by the usefulness of holding the belief. She may look back at other jumps that she's made, and if the gorge is 12 meters wide, she obviously wouldn't even consider leaping, making the inquiry irrelevant to his very chilling conditions. So it's not relevant anymore. He may believe that if he's got the energy of positive thinking, I put that on quotes, it may help him jump, but that's only prudential. It's looking for the usefulness. So that's it's too much of an assumption. So now we can talk about the movies, and now that I've set all these up, we can see and distinguish, I think, between our Harold, who is the Jewish guy, and Eric, the Christian. The problem with these contexts, and if you buy into what I say, the problem is it symbolizes a situation and it justifies his religious belief only in a situation where the world is imposed on you. It's not a situation where your suffering is self-imposed, which is what I think Eric does. For Abrams or Harold, I keep forgetting his name. For Harold, the situation is not self-imposed. He is Jewish, but he didn't have a choice in choosing his religion. But because the religion also determines his ethnicity, he seems to be stuck in a loop, and he seems to want to prove himself. And I think for Harold, the religious belief is justified, whereas at least more justified, or less unjustifiable. Whereas for Eric, it's not. For Eric, it's a belief that he doesn't want to question, but he doesn't seem to be as forced as Eric is into his situation. So, and notice that my conclusion is to promote tolerance of religious views, but at the same time it tries to distinguish between religious views in a way that is sort of satisfactory, I think. And with that, I want to sort of wrap this up and try to continue it in a conversational manner. This was tricky for me, but yeah. So I wanted to know, like, I think for every presentation that I give, I usually try to. How much time do I have?
You have 10 minutes.
Okay, good. Good. So I try to present you guys with questions, and I think the best way to get a point out is usually through the participation in a dialectical manner, and that's why I wanted to ask or subject you to the question. If well, I don't want to ask you what you think, but I want to ask, considering some of the stuff that you heard me say, if you have a question about it, please tell me. And if you think there's something wrong with it, tell me too. But if you take it as true, do you see Eric justified in his actions? So I'll pick some random. Any volunteers? Yeah, thank you for starting.
I think that you became a relativist, even though you were saying that it's a
it is a slippery slope.
Slope.
Yeah.
So I think that you have to justify your position.
So what do you? We're not in Q&A yet, so I want to guide the discussion. But
okay, so I think that Eric is not justified because I think your criteria is not justified to me. I think he's blurred with his unquestionable belief, and he's letting his belief to guide him.
Yeah, but isn't it? It's still better than. It's still a better, more defensible position than Harold's, right?
Continue.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure about that. For me, if it is first get back to your question about if it's justified or not, it really depends on your belief. Is it wrong? Is it right?
That's the whole point, right? I mean, we don't.
We don't know,
the point of
right?
looking at you got to look at this really carefully, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, we are going this making no assumptions, right? So.
Yeah, it's like the girl was one jump, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly
Like the
the same
climber,
example
like
you
the
just
climber
gave us.
case. Yeah.
So yeah, it's exactly the same thing. I think if I were that girl, I would have thought differently. I would have probably checked a lot of things in my mind. If I had a scientific mind, like something that comes from knowledge rather than belief, I won't necessarily jump, I think.
Well, that's already an assumption, right? I mean, you're assuming that scientific
No, this is not an
exposition
assumption.
leads
This
to
is the way that you
certainty.
grow up. Because if you grow up, it's really a childhood thing, I suppose. If you grow up while every person tells you, if you want to do this or that action, think before doing that, before doing this or that. But if your father says, go ahead, you can jump, you can do this, you can do that, it's really something comes from your childhood. It is not necessarily something that you think or you believe in. It's really deep into you. So if I would say the first guy is justified, I would say, yeah, because he just lived the time that the childhood, it comes real from his.
But even if you're a professional climber, yeah, and you can go ahead.
I think that example, there's a flaw in it, because you're assuming that a person is going to conclude his beliefs after the jump, okay? And the jump is for thinking that if he's going to make it or not, and belief is for he's going to make it or not. I think that example is a kind of a tricky example, but it doesn't apply to a religious belief. I think whoever made
But
this
what about, I know, so religious belief, remember what I took religious belief to be, right? There are only two conditions for us. We don't want to criticize the sufficient conditions for religious belief. We only want to look at the necessary conditions. And I think...
I think the religious, first of all, you have to believe in a priori to go in that realm of religion. And you know, there's a school of thoughts that don't believe in a priori. They don't think that a priori exists.
No, you don't have to believe in... So this is what I say about careful thinking. So to hold the belief, we gotta start from belief, right? So there is no... So you gotta imagine a universe when there is nothing, and then there's only one person, and that person holds a belief, right? We can't think of a priori.
That doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, but that's what careful philosophical thinking is, right? You start from
Zero.
somewhere, and you build it up.
Okay.
That's what tricky. That is what is tricky. Yeah, go ahead.
I think, you see, one of the reasons Descartes was very smart was because of making the distinction between a priori and a posteriori to somehow prove religion. I believe that was the smartness of him to make this distinction. Therefore, you cannot believe in religion if you don't believe in a priori.
That is
I
a
don't-
religion proof.
Siavash,
though. I
one
mean-
thing, because the battery of the camera is
Okay.
running out, can you conclude in a few minutes, but then we can go and
okay,
have a Q&A.
sure,
Yes, sorry, this is...
So the well, this is what I wanted,
Exactly.
actually. This is exactly what I wanted. So this is mostly an exercise. So what I wanted to get across is a message of careful thinking when you're talking about religious belief. And the discussion is, hopefully will lead into that. But just to say for the camera is to rush into judgment about religious belief is itself a supposition that we have from our mental constructs of living today. So just like how people who lived 200 years ago had conscience. I mean, the movie does show that religious belief, as some of you pointed out, has some is powerful. So it does seem to be like it's not crazy to say faith is good. It's not a crazy view. And some of the claims that a lot of scientists make today, even, they sound really crazy. Like the string theory, it sounds really crazy. But some of the beliefs, that we hold, or a lot of people hold, they are faith-based, but they're not crazy at all. But we have a tendency, because we appreciate science more, because we think it's the way to truth, if there is such a thing. We think that everything else should be disposed of. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let's give a round of applause.